There's a bottle of something sitting within reach of you right now. Beer, wine, whatever's chilling in your fridge. Cracking it open is one of the most casual things you'll do this week. You barely register the decision. Now, take it away completely. No bottle, no glass, no modern drink at all. Go back 13,000 years, to a burial cave carved into a hillside above what's now Haifa, Israel. Long before writing, before cities, before a single field of wheat had ever been deliberately planted. And you'll still find people burning unpaid backbreaking labor on the exact same buzz. Real farming was still thousands of years away. Bread, in any form you'd recognize, barely existed yet. But alcohol may have come first. By a wide margin. Did the human hunger to get drunk help drag our species toward agriculture, cities, and civilization itself? Stick with this, because by the end, you'll see why your own body is still quietly running software written roughly 10 million years before a single human being was born. For 70 years, archaeologists have argued over a question first posed publicly in 1953. Did people domesticate wild grain for bread or for beer? The earliest wild grains were miserable for baking. Low yield, hard to thresh, barely enough flour to matter. They were, however, perfectly good for a fermented mash. Researchers test residue trapped inside ancient grinding stones for a specific chemical signature called calcium oxalate, sometimes nicknamed beer stone. This signature only forms when starch has been deliberately malted, mashed, heated, and left to ferment. And that signature has turned up in some surprisingly old places. The oldest confirmed example sits in Raqefet Cave, in the Carmel Mountains above Haifa. It isn't a campsite. It's a Natufian burial ground holding roughly 30 individuals, dated to about 13,000 years ago. A Stanford-led research team studying the site identified around 100 stone mortars pounded directly into the bedrock. Residue analysis on 3 of them revealed a genuine 3-stage brewing process. Malting grain by soaking it, mashing, and heating it, then leaving it to ferment with wild airborne yeast. That's technique, not an accident. These hunter-gatherers weren't brewing for an ordinary meal. They were doing it for funerals, grinding grain by hand into solid rock for hours, just to send the dead off drunk. Carving a mortar that deep into bedrock, using nothing but stone tools, could take hundreds of hours of labor before it ever held a single batch. That's roughly 2,000 years before anyone in the region planted a deliberate crop of wheat. But this wasn't the only place instinct outran agriculture. At Göbekli Tepe, in southeastern Turkey, home to the oldest known monumental stone architecture on the planet, archaeologists have excavated massive limestone troughs, some large enough to hold roughly 160 liters at once. That's more than 300 pint glasses, poured from a single stone tub. Across the wider site, excavators have logged more than 7,000 separate grinding tools. Residue on some of these vessels shows tentative traces of oxalate, hinting at grain fermentation. Though the researchers involved are careful to call this evidence tentative rather than proven, the pull toward beer, not bread, may be the real reason wild grain was ever worth the trouble of domesticating. Raising these monuments required feeding, and possibly getting drunk, an entire organized workforce. But if you think humans invented this obsession, you're not even close. In 2000, Berkeley biologist Robert Dudley formalized what's now called the drunken monkey hypothesis. Primates evolved a specific attraction to the smell of ethanol, because in the wild, that smell reliably points to ripe, sugar-dense, calorie-rich fruit. Some fruit that wild primates eat can naturally ferment to an alcohol content of up to around 7%, close to a strong beer. Under this theory, wanting a drink was never a modern weakness. It was an ancient shortcut for finding food fast, in a competitive forest, before something else got to it first. And in 2014, researchers found the actual genetic fingerprint behind that shortcut. Researchers reconstructed ancient versions of ADH4, the very first enzyme your gut uses to start breaking down alcohol, going back 70 million years across primate history. They found a single amino acid swap, one small change in the genetic code. That appeared roughly 10 million years ago, in the shared ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas. That one swap made the enzyme around 40 times more efficient at metabolizing ethanol. It lines up almost exactly with when that ancestor started spending real time on the forest floor, where fallen, overripe, already fermenting fruit tends to pile up. Your ability to have a drink tonight without getting violently sick traces back to that single genetic accident. And this isn't a closed chapter of prehistory. It's playing out somewhere on Earth today. In a 2025 study, the same Robert Dudley, alongside Berkeley graduate researcher Alexi Morrow, measured the actual ethanol content of ripe fruit eaten daily by wild chimpanzees across two countries, Uganda and Côte d'Ivoire. They found roughly 0.3% alcohol by weight in typical fruit pulp. Scaled up to how much fruit a chimpanzee actually eats in a day, sometimes 5 to 10% of its own body weight. That works out to around 14 grams of pure alcohol daily. Adjusted for body size, that's the rough equivalent of 2 to 2.5 standard human drinks every single day. For that animal's entire life, sourced entirely from fruit lying on a forest floor. No brewing, no bottle, no intention required. But even that number was just a calculation, until someone decided to test it directly. Skeptics said this was just theoretical math, that no one had actually proven the chimpanzees were absorbing that alcohol. So Morrow went back into the field and tested it directly, collecting urine from wild chimpanzees in Uganda and screening it for the real breakdown products of ethanol. 17 of the 20 samples came back positive, some at levels comparable to a human after 1 or 2 drinks. Right now, in that same rainforest, wild apes with no farms, no fermentation vats, and no concept of alcohol are chronically, quietly intoxicated, running on the exact same digestive chemistry sitting inside your body at this very moment. So, look at that bottle or that glass again, the one within reach of you right now. It's probably always felt like a modern habit, maybe even a modern problem, something bottled, branded, and sold to you. Look closer at what's actually happening the moment it touches your tongue. The bottle is new, the label is new, the tax on it is new. But your body reaches for a piece of biological machinery that was finished roughly 10 million years before a single human existed. One lucky one-letter accident, quietly inherited from an ancestor you share with every chimpanzee and gorilla alive today. Long before bread, before cities, before writing, before anyone had a word for party, something in a body very much like yours was already reaching for that exact same feeling. You didn't inherit a vice, you inherited a very old piece of software, and it's still running. If you want to check the studies yourself, they're linked in the description below. Subscribe if you'd like the next one. There's a lot more buried in the evidence than this.